At some point in your family tree, there is a single woman. Not a metaphor, not a religion, a real woman, who lived approximately 8,000 years ago. And every human being alive today, all 8 billion of us, descends from her small group of survivors. Because 74,000 years ago, something happened. Something so catastrophic, so total, so absolute, that humanity was reduced to perhaps a few thousand people, maybe less. We almost didn't make it, and almost no one talks about it. The Toba supervolcano sits beneath Lake Toba in what is now Sumatra, Indonesia. Today it looks peaceful, a beautiful lake, a tourist destination. 74,000 years ago, it was the most violent event in human history. When Toba erupted, it released approximately 2,800 cubic kilometers of magma. To put that in perspective, the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980, which killed 57 people and was considered catastrophic, released about 1 cubic kilometer. Toba released 2,800 times that. The explosion was heard across the entire planet. Ash covered South Asia, the Middle East, and East Africa in a thick gray blanket. In some areas, ash deposits were 6 meters deep. Sunlight was blocked for years. Temperatures dropped by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius globally. Crops didn't grow. Animals died. Ecosystems collapsed. This is what scientists call a volcanic winter. And our ancestors were living through it, outside, with stone tools. Here is where the story gets deeply personal. Genetic evidence, specifically the study of mitochondrial DNA, suggests something extraordinary happened to the human population around this time. Normally, as populations grow over thousands of years, their genetic diversity grows with them. Mutations accumulate. Variations spread. But when scientists look at human DNA today, they see something strange. We are remarkably similar. Far more similar than you'd expect from a species that has existed for 300,000 years. Chimpanzees, who've been around far longer, have significantly more genetic diversity than we do. Why? Because at some point, our population crashed hard. The theory, known as the Toba catastrophe theory, suggests that after the eruption, the human population was reduced to somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 individuals. Some researchers argue it may have been even smaller, perhaps just a few hundred breeding pairs. Think about that. Every person you've ever met, every person who has ever lived, every philosopher, tyrant, saint, and murderer in human history, all descended from a group of people small enough to fit in a single village. So why didn't we disappear entirely? This is the part scientists are still debating. One theory: the survivors were in coastal Africa, where the ocean provided a buffer, food, resources, a slightly more stable microclimate. Another theory: it was pure chance. The right group of people happened to be in the right place. But there's a third theory, and it's the most unsettling one. We survived because we were different. Not physically, cognitively. Around this time in human history, something else was happening. Evidence of symbolic thinking, art, language, complex tools, begins appearing in the archaeological record. Some researchers believe the crisis itself accelerated our evolution, that the catastrophe forced the survivors to cooperate at a level our ancestors never had before, to share resources, to communicate, to trust strangers. In other words, the thing that almost killed us may have made us human. There's something deeply strange about knowing this. You exist because of a volcanic eruption 74,000 years ago. Because a small group of people, exhausted, starving, surrounded by ash and cold and death, chose to keep going. Or didn't choose. Maybe they just survived by accident. And that randomness, that terrifying, beautiful randomness, is the foundation of every human life that has ever existed. Every war, every love story, every invention, every atrocity. All of it balanced on the survival of a few thousand cold and frightened people who had no idea they were saving the future. The Toba catastrophe theory is still debated among scientists. Some argue the bottleneck was less severe than the genetic evidence suggests. Some argue the volcanic winter wasn't as devastating as initially thought. But the genetic signature remains. We are an unusually similar species. We carry the mark of a near-extinction event in our DNA, which means somewhere inside you, encoded in every cell of your body, is the story of survival, of people who had every reason to give up and didn't, or couldn't. We're still not sure which.